The Winter's Tale, Part 2. A Queen of Curds and Cream, the Oracle Fulfilled. A Queen of Curds and Cream. 16 years had rolled away since the day when the shepherd had found the little deserted baby and taken it to his own cottage. The old man had prospered since those days, and from having almost nothing had risen to large estates. The maiden who passed as his daughter had grown into such rare loveliness that the report of her beauty spread through all the country of Bohemia, and even reached the palace of the king. Polixenes, it will be remembered, had one son, Florizel, who was the same age as the young Prince Mamilius of Sicilia, dead 16 years before. Prince Florizel at this time was about 21 years old. It happened one day, when he was out hawking, that his falcon flew across the land belonging to the shepherd, and seeing Perdita, Florizel was so struck by her charm and beauty that he at once fell in love with her. From that day he was a constant visitor at the shepherd's house, so much so that the king, his father, noticed his frequent absence from home, and taking counsel with Camillo, they decided to go themselves to the shepherd's house in disguise to see what could be the attraction that was always taking the prince to this homely dwelling. The day they chose for their expedition was the great feast of the sheep shearing, when all the shepherds and shepherdesses collected together to make merry. Among the company, in the guise of a shepherd, came Florizel, who was only known to the adopted father of Perdita as Doricles, and whom he imagined to be nothing but a humble swain. The old shepherd had provided a goodly entertainment for his guests, and seeing that Perdita was inclined to be too shy and retiring, he insisted on her taking full direction of everything, reminding her that she was the hostess of the meeting, and that she must bid all these unknown friends welcome. "Come, quench your blushes, and present yourself that which you are, mistress of the feast," he said. "Come on, and bid us welcome to your sheep shearing, so your good flock shall prosper." Thus urged, Perdita made a brave effort to conquer her girlish shyness, and with the prettiest grace possible, she went up to the two strangers whom her father had pointed out, and bade them welcome. These strangers were Polixenes and Camillo. Calling to her a shepherdess who was carrying a basket of flowers, Perdita selected some and gave a little posy to each of the strangers. "Reverend sirs, for you there's rosemary and rue. These keep seeming and savour all the winter long. Grace and remembrance be to you both, and welcome to our shearing." Polixenes and Camillo were enchanted with the loveliness and modest grace of this lowly-born damsel, who, in spite of her bashfulness, showed that she could answer with wit and intelligence when they began to converse with her. For the king and Camillo, Perdita had chosen the flowers of middle summer: hot lavender, mint, savoury, marjoram, the marigold that goes to bed with the sun and with him rises weeping. These are the flowers of middle summer, and these she thought suitable to give to men of middle age. But when a bevy of fair young shepherdesses approached, in all the first sweet bloom of early girlhood, she longed to have some flowers of the spring that would become their time of day. "O Proserpina, for the flowers now, that frighted thou lett'st fall from Dis's wagon," she cried. "Daffodils, that come before the swallow dares, and take the winds of March with beauty. Violets dim, but sweeter than the lids of Juno's eyes, or Cytherea's breath. Pale primroses, that die unmarried ere they can behold bright Phoebus in his strength. Bold oxlips, and the crown imperial. Lilies of all kinds, the flower de luce being one. Oh, these I lack to make you garlands of." "This is the prettiest low-born lass that ever ran on green sward," cried Polixenes when, a few minutes later, Perdita led off with Florizel the rustic dance of shepherds and shepherdesses. "Nothing she does or seems but smacks of something greater than herself, too noble for this place." "Good sooth," agreed Camillo, "she is the queen of curds and cream." "Pray, good shepherd, what fair swain is this who dances with your daughter?" asked Polixenes of their aged host. The shepherd replied that he was called Doricles, and boasted that he was well off. He had it only on the young man's own report, but he believed it, for he looked like truth. "He says he loves my daughter. I think so too, and to be plain, I think there is not half a kiss to choose which loves the other best." "She dances featly," said the king. "So she does everything, though I report it who should be silent. If young Doricles do light upon her, she shall bring him that which he dreams not of." But in spite of the king's admiration for Perdita, he had no mind that the heir to the throne of Bohemia should wed the daughter of a lowly shepherd. As the feast went on and became merrier and more uproarious, Florizel could no longer restrain his affection, and calling the two strangers as witness, he begged that the contract of marriage between himself and Perdita should be there and then concluded. The aged shepherd was quite willing to join the hands, but Polixenes bade the young man pause. "Had he no father?" he asked, "and did he know of this?" "He neither does nor shall," replied Florizel. "Methinks a father is, at the nuptial of his son, a guest that best becomes the table," said Polixenes. "Was the father incapable, stupid with age or illness, crazy, childish?" "No," answered Florizel to all this, but he nevertheless persisted in refusing to let him know what was taking place. Then Polixenes threw off his disguise and revealed himself as the king. All was now consternation. He terrified the shepherd by saying he would probably be hanged for letting his daughter entrap the young prince. He commanded Florizel to part instantly from Perdita and follow him to the court, and he threatened the maiden with cruel death if ever she dared henceforth to encourage his son by the slightest word or caress. The old shepherd was in despair at the king's displeasure, for it meant ruin to them all, and perhaps a shameful death for himself. Perdita prepared with a breaking heart to give up her lover. She had often warned him what would come of this. She was no fitting mate for a prince. Her dream of happiness was over. "Being now awake, I'll queen it no inch further, but milk my ewes and weep," she murmured sorrowfully. But Florizel had no intention of giving up the bride to whom he had plighted his troth. Not for Bohemia, not for all the pomp that the sun saw, or the earth held, or the sea hid, would he break his oath to his beloved. Camillo, who had remained behind when Polixenes wrathfully departed, tried to reason with the prince, but Florizel was resolute. For some time, fearing a possible event such as had now happened, he had had a ship prepared for flight, which was riding at anchor close by. He bade Camillo return to court and inform Polixenes that he had put to sea with Perdita. What course he meant to hold it would be better for Camillo not to know, or the prince to tell. A plan now occurred to the good Camillo by which he hoped to benefit everyone concerned. He still kept a warm feeling of affection for his late master, Leontes, and often during his 16 years of exile he had longed to return to Sicilia. He now proposed to Florizel that he should carry Perdita to the court of Leontes, where they would be certain to receive the warmest welcome from the repentant king, who would be anxious to make every possible amends to the son for the way in which he had treated the father. Camillo, meanwhile, would stay with Polixenes, and do everything in his power to soften his resentment and reconcile him to his son's marriage. The oracle fulfilled. After the departure of Florizel and Perdita, the shepherd's son, seeing the despair of the old man because of the disgrace he had fallen into, counseled him to go and tell the king that Perdita was no daughter of his. "There is no other way but to tell the king she is a changeling, and none of your flesh and blood," he declared. "She being none of your flesh and blood has not offended the king, and so your flesh and blood is not to be punished by him. Show those things you found about her, those secret things, all but what she has with her. This being done, let the law go whistle, I warrant you." "I will tell the king all, every word," said the timorous old man, "yea, and his son's pranks too, who I may say is no honest man, neither to his father nor to me, to go about to make me the king's brother-in-law." The worthy rustics at once put their intention into practice, and hearing that the king had already left the palace in pursuit of his son, they followed him to the seaside to deliver over the things which had been found with the deserted infant. Since the death of Hermione, Leontes had lived a life of penance and gravity, devoting himself to the memory of his lost wife and son. Some of his counselors would fain have persuaded the king to marry again, but the impetuous lady, Paulina, faithful to her deeply wronged mistress, declared that there was no lady living that could be compared with her, or was fit to take her position as queen. Paulina reminded Leontes also of the words of the oracle, which had said that there would be no heir to the throne until that which was lost was found. Leontes, who was much more tractable than of old, and who knew now how to value the unflinching honesty of this outspoken lady, replied that he would never marry again until Paulina herself bade him do so. "That shall be when your first queen breathes again, never till then," said Paulina. And matters were in this state when Florizel and Perdita reached Sicilia. The young pair received the warmest welcome from Leontes, but closely following their arrival came a messenger from Polixenes, begging Leontes to seize hold of the prince, who, casting off both his dignity and duty, had fled from his father, and from his hopes, with a shepherd's daughter. Polixenes himself had arrived in Sicilia, bringing with him the old shepherd, the seeming father of Perdita. But the momentary cloud was soon dispelled, and great and unexpected joy filled the whole country. The things which the aged shepherd had taken to Polixenes furnished full proof that the rescued little babe was no other than the long-lost daughter of Leontes. The mantle of Queen Hermione, her jewel on the neck of it, letters of Antigonus found with it, which they knew to be in his handwriting, the majesty of Perdita herself, which so closely resembled her mother, the nobility of her bearing, which nature showed was above her breeding, and many other evidences, proclaimed her with all certainty to be the king's daughter. All was now rejoicing. Bonfires were lighted, and crowds ran about the streets, gossiping over the news, and wondering at all the strange things that were taking place. The meeting of the two kings, it was reported, was a sight never to be forgotten. Such a weeping for joy, casting up of eyes, and holding up of hands. Leontes, overcome with rapture at finding his daughter again, one moment embraced her, the next cried, "Oh, thy mother, thy mother!" Then he asked forgiveness of Polixenes, then embraced his son-in-law, once more flung his arms round his daughter, now thanked the old shepherd, who stood by like a weather-beaten relic of many kings' reigns. So with Paulina, joy and sorrow strove for utterance at the sight of the young princess. One moment she wept for the loss of her husband, whom the shepherd's son had seen killed by the bear. The next she was filled with rapture that the oracle was fulfilled. She lifted the princess from the ground, and so locked her in an embrace, as if she would pin her to her heart, that she might no more be in danger of losing her. The princess was told of her mother's death, with the manner how she came by it, bravely confessed and lamented by the king himself. Hearing that there was a wonderful statue of the queen, which had taken many years to make, and which was just completed, and in the keeping of Paulina, Perdita was most desirous to see it, and thither the royal party and all their company of lords and ladies now went. On arriving at Paulina's house, Leontes looked all about for the statue, but though Paulina led them through a gallery rich with many rare and beautiful objects, they did not see there what Perdita had come to look upon, the statue of her mother. At last they reached the chapel, and Leontes ventured to remind Paulina of the object of their visit. "As she lived peerless," replied Paulina, "so her dead likeness, I do well believe, excels whatever yet you looked upon, or hand of man hath done. Therefore I keep it lonely, apart. But here it is, prepared to see the life as vividly mocked as ever still sleep mocked death. Behold, and say 'tis well." Paulina drew back a curtain, and there, beautiful and motionless before their eyes, stood the majestic image of the dead queen. For a moment they stood mute and breathless, gazing in amazement, for surely artist's cunning had never wrought so wonderful a representation of life. "I like your silence," said Paulina. "It the more shows off your wonder. But yet, speak. First you, my liege. Comes it not something near?" "Her natural posture," murmured Leontes. "Chide me, dear stone, that I may say indeed thou art Hermione, or rather thou art she in thy not chiding, for she was as tender as infancy and grace. But yet, Paulina, Hermione was not so much wrinkled, nothing so aged as this seems." "Oh, not by much," said Polixenes. "So much the more our carver's excellence," said Paulina, "which lets go by some 16 years, and makes her as if she lived now." "As now she might have done," sighed Leontes. "Oh, thus she stood, even with such life of majesty, warm life, as now it coldly stands, when first I wooed her." "Give me leave," said Perdita, "and do not say 'tis superstition that I kneel and then implore her blessing. Lady, dear queen, that ended when I but began, give me that hand of yours to kiss." "Oh, patience," said Paulina. "The statue is but newly fixed. The colour is not dry." She made a movement to draw the curtain, saying that if they looked much longer they would presently think the statue moved, but Leontes implored her to let him gaze at it longer, for the more he did so, the more lifelike it appeared. It seemed to breathe. There was light in the eyes. It recalled to him all his love and sorrow for the lost Hermione. "Let no man mock me," he said, "for I will kiss it." Paulina begged him to forbear, and again offered to draw the curtain, and again he prevented her. "Either forbear, and at once leave the chapel, or prepare for further amazement," said Paulina. "If you can behold it, I'll make the statue move indeed, descend, and take you by the hand. But then you'll think, which I protest against, I am assisted by wicked powers." "What you can make her do, I am content to look on," said Leontes. "What to speak, I am content to hear, for it is as easy to make her speak as move." Then Paulina bade music sound, and as the soft strains floated through the chapel, the statue of Hermione stirred, stepped down from its place, and took Leontes by the hand. Yes, it was indeed Hermione, living and breathing, as she had parted from her husband 16 years ago. His long sorrow and penance were over. Henceforth he would live in tenderest affection with his deeply cherished wife. The faithful Paulina was not left to spend her latter years in loneliness. Antigonus was dead, but Leontes reminded her that as she had found a second wife for him, so he would find a second husband for her. "I'll not seek far," he said, "to find thee an honourable husband, for I partly know his mind. Come, Camillo, and take by the hand this lady, whose worth and honesty are richly noted, and here proclaimed by us a pair of kings."